This short video is about speed management on final approach, specifically about following AIP speeds under radar environment in accordance with AIP Supplement 64 of 2011, which requires us to maintain 180 from 20 to 10 miles from touchdown and 160 to 5 miles at certain airports: Mumbai, Chennai, Delhi, Kolkata, Ahmedabad, Bangalore and Hyderabad. And of course other international airports have specific speed control requirements, for example 150 to 4 in Singapore and 160 to 4 in Dubai. But today in this video we're going to fly our AIP speeds of 160 to 5 miles. So to set the scene, we are at glide slope intercept altitude or platform altitude of 1800 feet performing an ILS approach. We're in config 1 with speed selected 180. As we approach 10 miles, I'm going to start reducing speed to 160 knots and select flap 2, keeping in mind that we expect a deceleration in level flight of about 10 knots per nautical mile. So speed 160 blue and speed checked flap 2. For distance reference, I'm using the localized DME on the PFD. If you're doing an RNP approach, for example, you can use the threshold reference from the prog page as well. And I've expanded the PFD there for easier viewing. So there we have it. Speed is 160 by 10 miles. Now of course our aim is to maintain an indicated airspeed, that's the yellow reference line on the speed tape of the PFD, of 160 till 5 miles. Remember, the FCTM says that you can have your speed selected on approach to comply with ATC requirements. Just manage it when you're done complying with those speed requirements, and of course do so at an appropriate time which allows you to both comply with the speed requirement and meet your stabilization criteria. That is be stabilized by 1000 feet, which is what we're going to do here. Now how I like to do this is I like to be on the glide with my gear down. The reason for that is that the drag of the gear will keep the speed locked at 160 as the aircraft descends down on the glide. Without this drag of the gear, as the aircraft descends on that vertical profile of the glide slope, the speed would start bleeding up. So at about glide slope 1 dot, I'll put the landing gear lever down. Once again, the reason for this is that by the time I'm established on the glide, the wheels are down and I have the drag in hand to keep the indicated airspeed locked at 160 and not start building up. So glide slope 1 dot or so, gear is down. So by the time I'm established on the glide slope, the wheels are actually down and I've got that drag in hand. And now after this I can even go ahead and select my landing flap, flap 3, and by about 5.3 to 5.2 ish miles I'll go ahead and manage the speed. That 0.2, 0.3 is just to take into account the inertia. So by the time the speed starts reducing towards V approach, we are at actually 5 miles, and as we see, even with that bit of tailwind, we will be fully stabilized by 1000 feet on the barrow. Also don't forget, if required, the provision by the manufacturer, and I'm quoting here, in IMC a later speed and thrust stabilization can be acceptable provided that the aircraft is in deceleration towards the target approach speed and cruise stabilizes speed and thrust as soon as possible, no later than 500 AAL. But as you can see here, we're already just coming up above 1000 on the barrow and we are fully stabilized with thrust up and at V approach. And of course, for the provision I just mentioned, your operator must permit you to use that provision as well. And you may use the same technique while performing an NPA or an RNP approach as well. Some scenarios where you would not cut it so close and decelerate towards V approach sooner, that is basically manage speed sooner, or even consider performing an early stabilized approach, are in cases like when you have really strong tailwinds, well more than 10 knots for example, a much steeper than standard glide path or vertical profile, or if in very gusty and sheary conditions, or while performing a Cat 2 Cat 3 approach, or of course when coming in an abnormal configuration. But on a normal day, even as we saw with about 8-9 knots tailwinds, maintaining AIP speeds of 160 to 5 is very doable and really is all about energy management. It's just that we have it fixed in our minds that when the gear comes down, we manage speed, which results in a way earlier deceleration. Remember, you are flying the aircraft and you are in control of the speed, not some knob on the FCU. The speed trend vector is another great tool to help you decide when to manage the speed, so you can both maintain 160 to 5 and be fully stabilized by 1000 feet. Thank you.